Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parenting Coach podcast. I'm your host, Megan Jackson, and I'm so thrilled to be talking with Sarah R. Moore today. Sarah is a world schooling mama, an internationally published writer, and the founder of Dandelion Seeds Positive Parenting. She's also a certified master trainer for a global conscious parenting organization. She studied directly with some of the world's most respected psychologists, neuroscientists, researchers, and advocates for children. She was trained in the interpersonal neurobiology by the best-selling author, Dr. Daniel Siegel, and has advanced degrees in journalism and French. And as a bonus, is a graduate of the improvisational comedy school.
Improvisational.
There you go. Clearly speaking isn't my forte, but she is frequently a guest on podcasts and parenting summit. She was one of the speakers at the Gentle Parenting Summit that we had recently. And she offers a popular series of mini courses, webinars, and expert interviews. She's also currently writing a book to support caregivers to raise children with compassion, connection, and grace. We will make sure we have all her contact information in the show notes because you are definitely going to want to follow her and look her up at Dandelion Seeds Positive Parenting. Sarah, it was such a pleasure to have you join us for the Gentle Parenting Summit. I just loved your approach to parenting, and it really connected with so many of the parents because playful parenting is something that it just really clicks with the kids. They're playful. And I'm just curious, how can we bring that into our parenting?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, it was a joy to be a part of your summit and an honor. I am humbled to have been among so many other wonderful speakers. So thank you for having me. And as for how we can bring more play and more joy into our lives, well, number one, we can release our expectations that it needs to be something hard. A lot of us, when we think about what is playful parenting, we think, oh my goodness, I need to be funny. I need to graduate from improv comedy school like Sarah did. I need to look up how to be a playful parent on Pinterest. You don't have to do any of those things. It's all about relaxing. It's all about finding mutual joy in one another. And here's the trick. Playful parenting is anything at all that brings you joy. It does not ever have to fit a particular model or recipe for it to be effective.
That just is such a weight off my shoulders and is such a relief because there are books, there are courses on playful parenting, and some of us we play differently than other parents. I mean, some of us are rough and tumble, some of it that's really not our thing, and so you get worried that you have to be someone you aren't. So it sounds like what you're saying is just be you and enjoy your kids.
Hallelujah. That is it. Yes. You don't have to be somebody you're not. I mean, case in point, fairly stereotypically, my husband is more physical than I am. So if somebody is going to, tackle our daughter and get into this wrestling match, it's more likely to be him than it is me. Whereas I might look at her and I'm a word person. I might start speaking in an imaginary language. I might sit down next to her and say, do ba da da ba now now, and she'll look at me and she'll start speaking back in that language. It makes no sense. There's no point to it whatsoever. I'm not trying to accomplish anything other than that. It lowers our stress level because we're having fun doing something just goofy together. There are a million different, actually, more specifically, there are about 15 different play languages, if you will. They all serve different purposes. There's no right or wrong. We get to do and be that which is authentic to us. We don't have to fake it.
Oh, that just makes it more like now I'm thinking up new ideas of things I can do with my kids because they're also individuals too. So they respond differently to different things. What's an example of how you can use that in like an everyday situation? How can playfulness help us get our kids, out the door to the breakfast table, trying to move through the day? How can we incorporate playfulness into that?
Absolutely. One of the easiest ways to do that is actually a concept that I learned in improv comedy school. And it is the concept of yes and. It is, I'm not going to interrupt the energy or interrupt the flow of what you're doing to make you do something else. I'm going to work with the path you're already on and keep going that direction. So, for example, let's take getting to the breakfast table. We know we've got to be out the door in a little while, so we need to get done with breakfast. Not to mention, we don't want to still be staring at our kid who's playing, at 11 o'clock in the morning when nobody's even eaten yet. We want to move on with the day, right? So we might look at our child who is happily sitting on the living room floor, and let's say they're playing with their trucks. All right, so they're playing with their trucks, they're having a good time. When we come in with the traditional, very adult focused parenting approach of it's time for breakfast. Oh, come on, I told you 15 times. And we start escalating, the child starts retreating internally. The child will get all the more into their trucks because they probably, unless they're really hungry and super motivated to get over to that breakfast table, they want to keep doing what's fun for them. So we are less likely to succeed when we go in with this power over, I'm in charge of you, obey because I'm telling you to approach. What works much better in this example is yes, and I see you're playing with your trucks. Let's drive them down the super highway together. You might choose, let's pretend you have hardwood floors, or maybe there's a stripe in your carpeting, and that becomes the super highway. Let's drive them all the way over here. Next thing you know, you are driving the trucks to the breakfast table. And you don't have to argue, you don't have to cajole, you don't need to threaten or shame or punish or do any of these things that we know are disconnecting. Instead, you work with the child where they are in that moment. And what do you know? Let's drive the truck right up the leg of the table. Things can defy gravity all the time in playful parenting, right? Let's drive this truck up the table. And sure enough, what do you know? You're sitting in front of your bowl of cereal and life is grand. No tears, no harm. And we don't need to feel like the proverbial jerk for having yelled at our child and it's not even 8 o'clock in the morning yet. It's easier and more comfortable and a heck of a lot more fun for both the adult and the child when we simply work with what's already in front of us rather than trying to force something else.
That is such a great strategy. Yes, and what a great one, because I can think of so many things that you can, they're doing Lego, they're playing games. You can just continue the game that they're already doing and then still move them along.
Exactly. And it can even be something like, the child is, playing dress up or whatever. And you think, well, how in the world, like the clothes don't magically move, into the other room. How does this work? Well, you know what? Let's say that it's, superhero cape or whatever. All right, let's fly together to the living room. Let's fly to the car or whatever. Leave that cape on. We don't need to switch gears. We can go with what the child is doing. Maybe we pick up the child and help them fly, or maybe we simply put out our arms, and go. We can always work with whatever the child's doing.
That's so helpful. Can you use that kind of strategy, or do you have any tips for when a child is upset? How can playfulness come into that to help regulate their emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a tricky one because we have to be careful. If a child is severely dysregulated and sincerely upset, we don't want to minimize their emotional experience and have them feel that we're patronizing them. So we certainly want to hold space for their feelings. We want to respect their emotional experience, and we want to meet them where they are. So what I might do, first of all, is co-regulate with the child a little bit. Let's say the child, my goodness, the child does not want to go along with the thing we're saying, and they start having a big emotional release about it. The time then is not to say, well, I'm going to be goofy mommy or goofy daddy or goofy whoever. that's not going to feel legitimate and safe for their nervous system. Instead, when we co-regulate alongside them and say, you know what, I hear how much you don't want to go. I understand. I get it. You validate the child, you reconnect with the child. Everybody calms down in that case. Once you are both calmer, then the next best thing to do is that play. You don't go back into what got you into that place in the first place. You don't go back to, well, now that you're calmer, we're going to do this anyway. If it didn't work the first time, it's not going to work the second time. Instead, here's where you can use play. All right, so first approach didn't work, note to self, right? So, all right, we're calmer now. Tell you what, let's put on our moon boots. And look, I'm holding an imaginary moon boot right now. And I'm not talking like 1980 Michael Jackson version. I'm talking, imaginary boots you can put on to take giant steps across the room. Let's put on our moon boots and let's march to the door together. You do something to add a small degree of levity, nothing over the top, nothing ridiculous, but something that makes it more playful and therefore more emotionally safe to the child to try this different approach in the first place. If the child then escalates all over again, that's your message. I rushed it. I pushed it. I moved too soon. And then you go back to co-regulating again. If playful parenting isn't working, you can simply hold space for the child's feelings. I've got a separate mini course about holding space for big feelings, because guess what? Welcome to parenting. We're going to have to deal with a lot of big feelings in our children's lives. But there are ways to do that where the child feels emotionally validated, where we can reconnect, and then we can learn based on the child in front of us, not based on some formula that's a one size fits all, but based on the child in front of us. When is play most likely to be effective to connect with the child's heart? Final point on that, especially for children who are not used to us using playful parenting methods, it may take some time for them to build trust that this is the new way of doing things. Children might resist if they're used to being yelled at, if they're used to being told what to do, if they're used to being made to feel as if they're being controlled. It will probably take rebuilding some trust before playful parenting will ever work. How do we build that trust? We use it consistently, and we consistently create a space where they can be emotionally safe with us so that they can relax and get into the fun with us more often.
That is so helpful. Thank you. You like that was like a whole session there for anyone on who's listening in on how to, handle it when our kids have these big feelings, is to recognize, to honor those feelings and validate them and to co-regulate and help them to calm down, then move forward. And I like that playful approach, just to make it feel, like you said, make it feel safe. And that playfulness feels safer because that's something that they enjoy doing anyways. So that was really handy. My next question for you is then, what else can I do, or what do I do if like I'm having trouble and I'm just not feeling playful? Like, I want to be a playful parent, but there are just some days I'm at the end of my rope. I'm frustrated and it's just not happening. There's nothing. What I feel like I need. What else can I do?
Absolutely. Number one, that is totally valid. Welcome to being human, right? This is real life. So I hear you and I get it. So number one, we can realize if we're really not feeling it, we don't have to force it. We get to be our true authentic selves and model that for our children. It's okay to even verbally and outwardly say to our child, you know what, I'm struggling today. Will you please give me some grace, and I'm going to work on taking care of myself so that I feel better and can be more playful later today or tomorrow or whatever. So number one, it is perfectly healthy to acknowledge and accept where we really are. Number two, we can actually use brain science to trick our bodies a little bit. So for example, I know I shared this in the summit a little bit, but for example, if we smile even when we're not feeling it, our facial muscles actually send a message to our brain that we're happy. And our brain then will tell the amygdala, which is the part of the brain in the back that essentially triggers our fight or flight response. It'll tell our amygdala, oh, this isn't a threat right now, I can relax. So our cortisol comes down, that's the proverbial stress hormone, and we can start to self-regulate a little bit. When we self-regulate, I don't expect children to self-regulate. That is not a realistic expectation for children. We as adults have more practice self-regulating. So when we can say, all right, here are some things I can do to calm down in the moment. For example, I can do that smile. I can give myself a hug. It's known as proprioceptive input. And that's basically a fancy way to say, here is my body and I am safe in my body. And doing something like, squeezing your, the palm of your hand, or even some people do tapping, which by the way is scientifically valid. I didn't realize that until recently, but there are lots of different things that you can do with your body to help ground yourself. Belly breaths are another great one. You can get yourself back to a state of feeling more regulated, even within what seems to be a very dysregulated situation, so that you can be more playful. Stretching the body is another good one. If I stretch my body into an unusual position, that also sends messages to my brain that I need to relax. That also helps me move into a more playful mode. Last but not least, I can work with it. I'll share a very brief example of the other day when I was not being optimal, happy, playful, gentle mama. It was dinner time. I know from child development that the best way to help my child get to the dinner table is to physically go over to her, touch her because she's receptive to touch. Not all children are, but touch her and help her transition, sometimes using playful parenting, sometimes using plain old garden variety connection, help her come to the dinner table by my being present with her. But I was grouchy. I was really grouchy. I was overwhelmed. I was tired. I just wasn't having it that day. So I was standing in the kitchen, feet planted as if they were glued to the ground. And I was calling out, dinner's ready. Come to the table. I don't want to tell you again. Hey, dinner's getting cold. And next thing you know, I can tell my blood pressure is rising. I'm feeling less and less peaceful. And I'm not really a yeller, but I was doing my version of yelling, which was, my voice is raised and basically I just sound super stressed. I knew in that moment that as I was saying through gritted teeth, come to the table, I'm tired of telling you. I knew I shouldn't be doing this right now. I know there are better options, and yet I don't feel like I have control over what I'm saying and over my mood. I'm past the point of giving myself that regulating hug. I'm already yelling. So I decided once again to use my yes and concept and said, you know what? If I'm yelling, I'm working with the yelling. The yelling feels right in my nervous system right now. So instead, rather than lowering my volume artificially for myself, I decided to be playful in my yelling. And I said, you must come to dinner right now. Otherwise, we're all going to turn into penguins again. I have no idea where that came from, but you better believe my daughter looked up, said, we're going to turn into penguins? She's 8, by the way. And next thing you know, she, of her own volition, got up, came across the room, stood right next to me. And 3 seconds later, we were washing our flippers together in the kitchen sink because it was time to eat. And then we moved on to have our sardines, which really was not at all sardines. It was a dinner that you and I would probably enjoy eating, and much more than sardines. But we kept it playful, and I worked with my anger and frustration rather than pretending it wasn't there. So that was a long-winded answer, but those are 3 very specific ways you can deal with it when you just don't want to deal with it.
I love your practical real life examples, because as you were saying that, I'm like, yes, oh my goodness, I've said those exact words. And then I always feel so terrible because I don't know, what else can I pull from? I'm trying to look at my posters and be like, I teach this stuff. How can I not know what I'm doing? But you're right. It's all about that. We feel like we're out of control. And so your strategies are really great for getting ourselves back into a sense of control because we're re-engaging the whole part of the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah. So breathing, definitely getting that oxygen in there and working with what we've got going on. I hadn't considered that, but yeah, that's a great one to be able to do.
And it's
Um,
real because we have our moments.
I know, and I appreciate that you're just so honest about that because sometimes when we're listening in, we feel like, okay, these are what the experts are saying. This is what I need to do. And, you know, let's be honest, we get dysregulated, we get upset. And so we can model that for our children. And I think that's a huge thing that it's okay because you're modeling it too.
Absolutely. In fact, for anybody who might appreciate this out there, when I told my daughter, 6 months ago that I'm writing a book, she very innocently and very legitimately looked at me and said, Mommy, is it a book on how to make mistakes? And I said, no, sweetheart, it's actually not a book on how to make mistakes, but I suppose I could write that one too. Normalize the mistakes, normalize being human. The book is about something totally different, but we get to be real because we get to show our kids how to grow up and be real too.
And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Sometimes we do as parents, I don't know, mess up. We yell, we shout, we do, we didn't do it quite the way we had imagined being gentle parents. How can we then, make those repairs and do that reconnection? Because I feel like sometimes we feel like, okay, we didn't get it right the way we wanted to. Now I've messed up my kids. But really, I think there's so much that can still be done. There's so much power in healing in that reconnection, that repair piece afterwards. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You just said a couple of the buzzwords that we really need to unpack: rupture and repair. It's a scientific thing. So a rupture is any time we mess up. The repair is any time we make it right. Many of us were raised to believe, either by our families of origin or just by society, that, you know what, we messed up, just let it go and move on. No, letting it go and moving on skips the repair part. The repair is where the healing happens. How we do a repair is, number one, we apologize sincerely and say, here's how I messed up. We acknowledge pain. I know I hurt you when I did this thing. We can't just say, I did this thing, I'm really sorry. We have to add the piece about, I know it hurt you when I did this. That's the validation for the child. When I run into the situation again, here are the specifics of how I plan to handle it differently. Spell out for them that you have a plan. And finally, ask for forgiveness. Will you please forgive me for this? Now, here's the thing. We can't expect that our child is going to say, yes, of course I forgive you. That, if anything, is a learned response that we as adults often think like, oh, we have to say, yes, I forgive you. No, we don't. Kids are great at being authentic and saying, I'm not ready to forgive you. I don't want to forgive you. I will never forgive you. Well, it's unlikely that they will never forgive us, but that basically translates to, I need some time. And there's some science behind this as well. We know from research that for every one negative emotional interaction we have with somebody, it takes 5 positive interactions with that person to compensate for the one. So when our child says, I'm not ready to forgive you yet, even if they say it in less kind terms than that, it essentially means my nervous system isn't ready. I need to have 5 solid attempts at reconnection. One of those might be reading a story. Another one might be I need a hug. It doesn't have to be apologize 5 times. It means I need enough validation in my nervous system that you really are making it safe for me to be here with you emotionally. That's where the repair happens. The beautiful thing is, once we have the repair, our children can truly heal from the experience, as can we. We also get to forgive ourselves along the way. By the way, parent guilt and shame are very real things. And I've got special mini courses all about those topics as well. But when we allow ourselves to forgive ourselves, even if our child hasn't forgiven us yet, that's where the healing happens for us. With time and through that repair process, that's where the healing happens for them. And this is how we avoid permanently messing up our kids. We will mess them up in different ways, but it doesn't have to be the ways that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. We can heal every single time. And if we have to apologize and go through this whole process 10 times a day, so be it. Again, welcome to being human. We all have good days and bad days. You're all welcome here, and I get it.
That is so healing, really, to hear that, because, and it's really helpful too, because we're modeling for our children by doing it how this repair works, so that they know when they mess up that that's not the end for them too, that there's a next step there. They can reconnect back with us or with their siblings or anything else that comes along. So and it really does help you inside with that mom guilt, that parent guilt. It's very real. So
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to listen in on your mini courses and things. You have a huge library. Can you tell us more about what you offer and where we can find you?
Sure, absolutely. So easiest way to find me is dandelionseeds.com. It's dandelion-seeds.com. If you squish it together, you'll end up with dandelion. So if you want parenting support, add the hyphen between dandelion and seeds.com. So I'm on all the social media as well. So you can find me everywhere except for TikTok, because even though I dance, I haven't exactly mastered the TikTok thing yet. So maybe someday, but everywhere else I am. I am releasing a book in the very near future, so details about that are forthcoming. As you mentioned, and as I have alluded to a few times, I've got more than 40 mini courses. I have one introductory course about the keys to positive parenting. It's about 45 minutes long, where I get into 3 specific things we can do as positive parents to increase the likelihood that our children will run to us rather than away from us when there are problems. I also have expert interviews where I have spoken with a lot of the very most brilliant minds in the world about child development and all of the things related to this very work that we do. So feel free to check those out as well.
Thank you so much. Do you have any last minute encouragement or tips for parents as they try to be more positive and more playful in their parenting?
Absolutely. My last tip for today is simply be intentional about it. Find one thing. I don't care how small it is. I don't care if right now you simply roll and wiggle your shoulders for a couple of minutes just to shake up whatever energy you've been carrying around today. Do one thing for yourself that gives you joy today, because you'll be able to carry that greater sense of joy, even if it's brief, even if it's fleeting. You'll be able to carry that forward into your parenting and have greater connection with those around you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I look forward to, more talks, more summits, and more from you. Definitely looking out for your book, because that's one that's going to be at the top of my wish list. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate you.